What is your overall reflection on the importance of listening to young people?
Thank you very much. Maybe firstly, let me thank you for the opportunity from a South African perspective to be here today. And also thank you, Kgaogelo and Sarah, for being on the platform, and indicates that from a South African perspective, it's quite exciting for me as a minister, for instance, of social development in particular, to be able to see two young women on the platform. And I'm sure that you never got to the platform by not doing anything. You did something in order for you to be on the platform. And congratulations for you to be on the platform and getting the opportunity. And I know that when you are on this platform, I don't think you're just representing yourselves, but you're representing millions of other children, many of whom do have an opportunity to speak out, both from a point of view of homes, in their families, in their communities, anywhere else, but with millions others who are unable to do so. So as you continue to be able to occupy this platform, it's important for you to always remember that there are other children who you represent. You represent their voice because they are voiceless, and the different governments of the world, and in particular our government, the government of South Africa, as led by President Cyril Ramaphosa. The voice of children is very important to us, and it's much more important considering the fact that we coming out of a very difficult liberation struggle, which ended up in 1994, when we then had a constitution, and a constitution that really takes into consideration the rights and responsibilities of children. So last month, for instance, South Africa submitted its periodic report to the Committee on the Rights of the Child to demonstrate how well we promote and protect rights of children, guided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC. As part of finalizing the report, we consulted with children across the country to ensure that their voices are heard, especially on matters that affect them. And I had the pleasure at the time when we finally had to come together with the children, and President Cyril Ramaphosa himself was at the platform, where at least he was also able to hear the children. Children's rights to be heard is one of the four guiding principles of the CRC. The Department of Social Development co-hosts the annual Nelson Mandela's Children Parliament, which gives the children to voice their concerns and aspirations to the attention of Parliament, the media, children and young people themselves, and society at large. Maybe I might even add that when I started in this department, I was presented by the children a children's charter, which had actually been drafted by the children themselves. And it was it was a pleasure for me to take that charter, being new in the Department of Social Development, and handing it over both to the President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the Deputy President Mabuza. Thank you so much for that question.
What is your opinion regarding development of education over the past few years in both South Africa and the world?
Maybe I should start with a very personal response to it, because I am a product of a grandmother who was just a domestic worker and who never had the opportunity of going to school herself, but who tried to educate herself one way or the other, and even be able to even just at least sign her name when she goes to the post office to go and get letters. But what I think is important from a personal point of view was that she, like many other South African grandmothers at the time and grandfathers at the time, they were making sure that despite the system of apartheid, we needed to be educated. And my grandmother made it very clear to us as a family, myself and my siblings, that nothing will liberate us except education, and that she did not want any one of us to be domestic workers like herself, and therefore she was going to give everything she could in order for us to be educated. So I am here because, one, I did participate in the liberation struggle and all that, but two, because my grandmother told me that education is the best. And so when I had the opportunity to further my studies and go to university, that was my first option. So it is important for everyone, and especially young people, to appreciate and understand that they have to go to school. But at the same time, they must understand that going to school means they must be responsible, they must take responsibility, and they must also make sure that the conditions are created by our different governments. Conditions must be created through ensuring that there are schools, but besides the schools, even where they live, they must be able to pursue their education, because many of our children, they go to school and then when they come back home, they find that the conditions are not conducive for them to do their homework, to do their work very well. So different governments must make sure that that happens. But in the South African context, our constitution recognizes education as a fundamental human right, because it is through education that we can help each child to realize their full potential and contribute to society. It is former President Nelson Mandela who said, and I quote, "No child in Africa, and in fact anywhere in the world, should be denied education. The state has the central responsibility in the provision of education and training opportunities. Therefore, has invested in education and significantly improved access to education. Currently, access to primary and secondary schooling has reached universal enrollment, with the participation of girls being one of the highest in the world. And that's the excitement, obviously. Significant access to basic education, early childhood development, which we call ECD, grade R, and introduction of quintile schools to ensure that no child is denied access to education because of family circumstances. An expansion of school infrastructure in rural and township areas is critical. One of the biggest challenges we have in South Africa at the moment is the rural schools, the access to the schools. Even if the access is there, but the infrastructure is not so very good. So the focus by government right now is to make sure that we create the conducive environment and make sure that the infrastructure, starting with transport from home, getting to school, the infrastructure in the school is also conducive for the children. Government has expanded access to higher education through the National Student Financial Aid Fund, which is normally called NSFAS, which is aimed at improving participation rates amongst disadvantaged South Africans. This is our commitment as government.
How do you believe that we can create a safe learning environment for children all over the world, for example, those who are in child-headed households or drug-infested communities?
Yes, as I indicated earlier on, I was saying that it's important for us to ensure that platforms like the one that we have today, we share best practices, because the differences in terms of creating safe learning environment differs in different communities. But from a South African perspective, usually it's about the infrastructure for the children, whether it's issues of transport, whether it's issues of the infrastructure in terms of the classrooms, where they have to be, and whether it's just the activities in the school. Is the school itself conducive for them, and in particular, young girls? Part of what we find to be a problem in South Africa sometimes is the issue of bullying, even in the schools. What do we do to make sure that there is no bullying? And bullying, I think, is a universal problem that we must be able to deal with all around, because sometimes in South Africa, we think we're the only ones who are suffering from certain challenges. The other issue for me, also being a Minister of Social Development, is just the social ills that confront our communities and that make it very difficult for creating a conducive environment. So the first and most important thing is to make sure that children, from where they wake up in the morning, because if they wake up in not a good environment, how you expect them then to be productive throughout the whole day? And we believe in South Africa that creating and maintaining safe learning environment for children requires involvement of the wider community, because safety starts in families and communities first. We are responsible for families, for instance, as a Department of Social Development, But being responsible for families also is connected to a whole range of other government services, whether it's transport, whether it's health, whether it's education itself, and all others. It's about creating a conducive environment. In the Department of Social Development, we are implementing a number of child protection initiatives, such as child care forums, which we call RISIHA, Resilience, and deploying child and youth care workers in communities who work closely with local schools and teachers to ensure early identification of children in need of care and support to prevent school dropout. Child and youth care workers are the primary source of support for mental health and general well-being of children. The services they provide are particularly essential when children are struggling or experiencing trauma and challenges in life. A key area of care and support child and youth care workers provide is building child resilience to mitigate the impact of adversities, enabling children to rise above the challenges that they face. These initiatives are designed to benefit and protect orphans and vulnerable children, including child-headed households in our communities, against immediate social and economic risks. One of the issues that relates to what we call child-headed households, it's time when they lose their parents. And we must recall that HIV and AIDS is one of the things that, one of the diseases that devastated a whole lot of families, where both parents sometimes or one parent was lost, and then the children remain as children and they have to be assisted by the elderly children. And you can imagine the burden that is on the child who is the oldest in the family. And therefore, as government of South Africa, we took that we need to be supportive of such child-headed households, and also ensure that even the environment where they live, the homes where they live, it becomes our responsibility to support them. Schools are implementing anti-bullying and substance abuse prevention programs because, again, we have a problem now of the social ills, which includes alcohol and abuse, which includes drug abuse. I'm sure Kgaogelo will remember that not long ago we had a big problem of the children who died in a tavern, children who had gone to celebrate the end of their exams and pens down, and we lost 22 children just in one place, and they were all wiped out. So that is again the issue of how do we ensure that children make the right decisions? How do we empower them to make the right decisions, not to go to areas that might pose a danger for them?
What interdepartmental and international systems do you have in place that promote equal and standardized social development as well as education?
Thank you very much for that question. Let me just start by indicating that as a government, we also form part of the global world. And therefore, for instance, when we go to the United Nations or we go to any other international platforms, we make sure that as a government, we are also regarded by all the different, if I can call them machineries that enable us to participate, your UN conventions or any other convention, including the AU, because we mustn't forget that we also belong to the African Union. And so what happens to the children in the African continent is of utmost importance to us. And as a government, we are very conscious. And as a government, we are always wanting to hear the voice of the children so that they make inputs even on how we are implementing those international conventions as a government. But I think what is also important is the fact that we have NPOs, non-profit organizations, and NGOs who also support us, but we also work with them. And by the way, the Department of Social Development is the one that's responsible for the registration of those non-profit organizations and so forth. And we spend quite a sizable amount of money on our budget to support them, because we see them as an extension of supporting activities on the ground, be it in schools, be it in the communities. And I think that their participation and also involving in being involved in oversighting us, because NPOs and NGOs are not just about supporting people on the ground. They also take the opportunity of doing an oversight and checking whether government itself is really implementing the decisions that it said it would do, the programs that government intends to do in order to change the lives of children. And we also have parliament, by the way, in South Africa, because remember, we've got the three tiers. We've got the executive, we've got parliament, and we've got the judiciary. And I can tell you that from my experience in the past 24 years being in government, I've seen that parliament takes a very active role in oversighting government departments, and in particular in relation to the issues of children. They really ensure that they do the oversight, and we are accountable to parliament as government.
How do you think that other governments can be more inclusive of children in decision-making and in developing solutions to problems that they may face?
Thank you for that question, Sarah. I think that recognition of the importance of children and listening to children, as children have been calling for that themselves, they've been demanding on different governments. And in South Africa, we have very active children who've also got their own platforms, like the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament, where children are able to raise their questions. But also from a South African perspective, we enable children at the different levels of government, because we have got the national government, we've got the provincial government, and we've got the local government. We make sure that we don't only get children to be talking to us only at national level. We make sure that at the next two layers going down, they also create a platform for the children. The other area is, schools are the center where children need to be listened to, because going to school is not a one-way process where the teachers will just come and tell you this is what you need to do and that's it. We are in an environment now where young people are exposed to a whole lot of information, and they need to be assisted in terms of the absorption of that information, the usage of that information, including even being able to find out which one of this information is harmful to them. But in conclusion to that question, I think it's more about what happens in the family, because before you even go out to the school or go out to your community is what happens in the family. But also it's about what kind of families are we building, because these days the challenges are quite huge. And family is no longer the same as it was maybe 20 years ago. So it's also about us adjusting to today's times and the needs and the demands of children today.
The final question, while we're on the topic of listening to children, is, do you have any advice for future generations of children that are to come?
I'm a grandmother, so it's very exciting for me, because I have these grandchildren who come now and ask questions that I could have never been able to ask my mother nor my grandchildren. So the advice is that don't keep it to yourself. Say it out. And if they feel you are wrong in what they're saying, let them convince you why they say you are wrong. I think that parents, grandparents, communities, different structures must be able to listen to to children today, because children have got a say, they've got a voice. We must create a conducive environment for them, because if we don't, then we discover that they didn't have all the necessary information. They took action that is not very helpful to them, and then we blame them tomorrow. Let us engage, and for me, the engagement starts with the engagement at family level. Lastly, to the young boys and girls, there is this problem of teenage pregnancies. I believe that with today's development and technology and communication, we've got to be able to communicate to both young boys and girls to indicate to them they don't have to be rushing for things that are not going to be helpful to their growth. They must not rush for things that are not going to be helpful to their future. We have too many girls that are dropping out of school because they've become pregnant, and a girl doesn't make herself pregnant. Somebody makes the girl pregnant, and therefore the communication has to go to both men and women, youth, young girls and boys, including those who are at school right now, to say, think about the future. There's better things to come. The issue of children can wait until you are able to take care of your children, because we've got too many teenage pregnancies, too many children and parents and single parents who cannot be able to cope. And the message is we can end that, and we can only have children when we are ready to take care of the children.